Oh my God. Oh my God. I called it. Oh my God. I called it instantly, dude. Delusional, dude. Delusional. Oh my God. I hate these people. Anyway, let's talk about this. This is going to piss off a lot of people, what I'm going to say about Ukraine targeting Russian airfields in major drone attack. Are you guys ready? Let's start.
To Ukraine's drone attacks that targeted military air bases inside Russia, leaving dozens of aircrafts in flames. Marcus Moore tracking the latest. Good morning, Marcus.
Well, George, good morning. This was an extraordinary operation. Ukraine successfully infiltrating deep inside Russian territory and launching this attack. And this escalation comes just as a new round.
No, my Ukrainian heart can't take it, Lamont. No, you're not going to be mad. No, listen, I'll just start off by saying, will I say even anything remotely critical of Ukraine for doing this? No. You can say lib take all day, every day. Is Ukraine completely armed to the gills by every single Western nation? Absolutely. Okay. Is Ukraine completely in the right to blow up Russian bomber planes? Oh, hell yes, they are. Okay. Not even remotely questionable. 10 toes down. I hate NATO. I hate American intervention. I hate what Russia has done, obviously, in Ukraine. There is no remote possibility that I would ever criticize Ukraine for doing this right now, especially right now. Why? Okay. Why? Because not only did Zelensky basically get on his hands and knees, okay, and say, yes, master, I will do whatever the f you want, as Donald Trump, being the moron that he is, that was being guided by Vladimir Putin into attacking Zelensky and humiliating him, embarrassing him, weakening his position as within the leadership structure of Ukraine, while also forcing him in to cutting a horrible deal for the Ukrainians after so many people have died. Vladimir Putin very clearly does not give a about doing a ceasefire. He recognizes the position on the ground. He recognizes that his forces in eastern Ukraine are dialed in, and he wants to try to decouple Ukraine from America while simultaneously advancing further into Ukrainian territory. It is very obvious. It is very obvious to me that these past 3 years especially have shown that as America's power on the global stage is waning, we are now firmly committed to regional powers behaving with might is right politics, okay? And one thing that I have seen from what Israel does and what Israel gets to do and how Israel retaliates, Israel only responds to more vulnerable populations that it holds captive. Israel's response, for example, to Iran was incredibly limited in comparison to its response to Gaza, in comparison to response to even Lebanon, which was still infinitely more violent than what it did to Iran. But why? But still significantly more restrained than what it does to Gaza. Why? Because, I'm sorry to say this, but everyone is on their own. Okay? Everyone is on their own. And Russia, just like Israel, will only be forced to the table to engage in the act of bargaining when they realize that they've incurred penalties that are far too costly for the Russian government, for the Russian military. That's just true. So this act from the Ukrainian military was a last-ditch effort to try and show Russia that they still got some smoke, that they can still make this costly for them. Okay? At this point, I go so far as to say this is, it's a way to get Vladimir Putin. If this is a way to get Vladimir Putin to recognize that this is too costly, okay, and more of this could potentially happen, then great. Hopefully they can get to the ceasefire, get to the table to do an actual ceasefire proposal. From what I understand, they hit 41 bomber planes. 41. That is insane. Okay. And not a single Ukrainian operator or agent that conducted this campaign died. In terms of the war of attrition, okay? And I don't know if it's actually 41 planes that are now inoperable, okay? I don't know how badly they damaged all of the planes that they claimed. That's the Ukrainian claim, so I'm sure the number is lower than that. All I'm saying is, contrary to what Israel did in Lebanon with the pager attack, this one, I think is infinitely more valid, regardless of who is giving total backing to Ukraine, which is the entirety of the Western world. Well, not as much anymore. I'm telling you right now, it would be unimaginably hypocritical of me not to praise what they did while simultaneously talk about Hezbollah attacking Israeli military targets. Okay, in an effort to cause some kind of penalty to the state that is conducting a genocide. You don't actually think someone like Putin will sign a deal, right? Like, why are we just removing reality and thinking he's some thought-provoking man that will peacefully chill out? Did I say that? Did I say he'll peacefully chill out? No, I didn't say that at all. I said, if this becomes costly enough, only then will he look at the deal in front of him and recognize it as a good one. If he doesn't consider this deal to be a good deal, as he currently does not, because he thinks he can get more gains on the ground, he can have a better foothold by militarily punishing eastern Ukraine and overtaking or pushing the battle lines further and further towards Kiev. I think it's a valid one, hopefully in the direction of a ceasefire.
Round of peace talks is set to get underway. This morning, astonishing footage capturing in real time Ukraine's surprise drone attack on some of Russia's key airfields. Smoke rising into the air, the coordinated drone strike hitting at least 4 locations, crippling nuclear-capable bombers stationed deep inside Russia.
It looks like around 30% or higher of their strategic bombers were destroyed. Some of these drones were as low as $500, taking out million-dollar aircraft. It was a blow tactically, it was a blow strategically, and it was a blow politically.
An attack that Ukrainian sources tell ABC News was a year and a half in the making. The drones capable of striking Russia after first being smuggled into the country on what appear to be shipping containers. The containers equipped with retractable roofs that could be opened remotely. And when the timing was right, Ukraine struck. Drones seen here in video shared online flying out on their mission. The Ukrainians did not inform the U.S. ahead of time. The apparent escalation in this war comes as President Trump...
Cap. I guess the only reason why I would believe that is because they just don't trust the Trump administration not to leak the details to Vladimir Putin ahead of time. Under different circumstances, I'd be like, I don't believe that. I would go so far as to say that America had a hand in this operation. But I feel like that's giving too much credit to the American intelligence agencies and not enough credit to where the responsibility is, which is, like, I'm more willing to assume that they were in cooperation with the European intelligence communities. Russia is obligated to Cold War treaties like SALT and START, require them to be based at observable locations for satellite verification. Makes you wonder. CIA established 15-inch bases in Ukraine designed to do operations in Russia. I mean, I still think that America had a hand in this. Okay, I do. Nothing that Ukraine does, America has a hand in everything that Ukraine does, okay? However, the reason why it's more believable than ever before is because of America's current posture. Like, I could see the CIA not informing Donald Trump. Like, even if they're conducting this operation, I could see them not telling Donald Trump until after the fact. Donald Trump is basically a couple steps removed from talking about how Ukraine is the enemy of mankind, like Tim Pool, bro. He also does not want to offend the sensibilities of Vladimir Putin, who he often repeats is not behaving like himself. Whenever he talks about Vladimir Putin, like, I don't know, bombing civilian targets or whatever, he just keeps going, oh, this is not like you, Vladdy Poo. It is exactly like him. What do you mean? What is he like if not this? Like, I can see both sides of this argument. On the one hand, maybe they finally got the Trump and got him to recognize that, like, unless there's additional pressure on Russia, he's not going to come to the table, and he's just basically playing you like a fiddle, or he's basically stating, or they just didn't tell him at all until after the fact because they were worried he would still leak it to Vladimir Putin, because Donald Trump knows Vladdy gets mad when when things like this happen. And I'm sure Vladimir Putin, with the remaining bombers that they have, will probably punish the Ukrainian civilian population for this.
Has criticized Putin's attacks on civilians and grown increasingly impatient with both sides, threatening to walk away from peace talks. The second round of peace talks set to get underway in Istanbul, Turkey, with so much at stake. But
this is also happening right. Can we all admit that Turkey is not only at the table, but is the table, and that Ukraine probably did this because they're jealous? They're jealous of Turkey's involvement. They did not want Turkey to be so prominently featured in this peace process. Isn't Erdogan a Georgian? He is, yeah.
The volley of attacks we saw this weekend, including Ukraine's surprise strike, I think shows that both sides are capable and are prepared to keep fighting this war that's been on now for 3 years. Michael.
Yeah, they've shown that, Marcus. Thank you so much.
Ukrainian and Russian delegations are in Istanbul for peace talks. The real story, though, this unprecedented and audacious drone attack by Ukraine on Russian airfields and bombers. Ukraine attacked bases deep inside Russia, thousands of miles from the front lines, in what they're calling Operation Spiderweb. Ukrainian officials said that dozens of Russian warplanes were destroyed. Let's get right to CNN Chief International Correspondent Nick Payton-Walsh. This is quite a backdrop for these talks, which take place shortly, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely startling, the sophistication of this raid. One of these air bases hits almost halfway across Siberia. The Ukrainian security service able to use mobile wooden homes. Essentially, the roofs of them seem to have opened up and allowed these clouds of drones remotely piloted to target some of Russia's most important long-range strategic bombers. 41 damaged, according to Ukraine's security service, at air bases that must have thought they were basically far enough away to be impregnable. Ukraine very keen to announce that all the people involved in this year-and-a-half-long operation have since left the country. And yet another sign of how Ukraine's able to use its outsized use of technology to inflict significant.
Ain't no way. If Taco Trump is already folding on Iran, the American people need to know about it. Oh my God. Oh my God. Remember how I was joking about, like, let's talk about Taco Trump and how let's use Taco Trump to get a ceasefire negotiation. Remember when I said that? This goddamn demon turned around and is like, oh, Taco Trump gotta nuke Iran. You better nuke Iran. He's doing it for evil. He's doing it for evil. God, I hate these animals, dude.
Something which, frankly, Kiev has always felt would be impregnable, but is increasingly showing its vulnerability over time. What does this mean? We don't know exactly what damage it's going to do to the nightly horrors inflicted on Ukrainian civilians by these long-range bombers. Some of them, indeed, were old enough they were still using propellers. But it's another sign that Ukraine is able to sometimes upset the balance. And as you mentioned, too, a remarkable backdrop for these talks in Istanbul. Here's what
I'm going to watch it afterwards, after I'm done.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky at a NATO summit in Vilnius today had to say.
Europe, together with America, has better weapons than Russia. We also have stronger tactical solutions.
Mr. President, you have to allow us to blow up the Russian airplanes. Mr. President. I'm sorry. They are saying you are Taco, Mr. President. I do not believe.
Our Operation Spiderweb yesterday proved that Russia must feel what its losses mean.
Now do Hamas. They don't even, Hamas rarely ever speaks English, dumbass. I would. I do like a Arab accent every now and then.
Is what will push it toward diplomacy.
We just lost the Ukrainians, you won back. Come on, dude. I mean, listen, I think this was an impressive act of espionage. Okay. But like, yeah, I'm going to still do the Zelensky voice.
And when Russia takes losses in this war, it's obvious to everyone that Ukraine is the one holding the line, not just for itself, but for all of Europe.
You could see in his arrival in Vilnius, Zelensky there with a bit of a spring in his step, frankly.
To Mr. President, I say, you're welcome.
A long needed boost to Ukrainian morale, suffered so badly after that Oval Office blow-up with President Donald Trump. Does this change Russia's thinking? Well, many felt these peace talks in Istanbul were another example of Moscow's slow rolling, a peace process that had very minimal interest in seeing lead to a ceasefire.
Bro, dude, it's kind of crazy watching Russia operate on the Israel route without being the favored client state. You know what I mean? Like, they literally saw what Israel was able to do. They saw what Israel was able to do with, like, the ceasefire negotiations and how they could string along the dumbasses in the American government. And because, imagine comparing Ukraine to Hamas, like the U.S. ain't already giving Ukraine. Yeah, no, there is no comparison. We are backing Ukraine in this conflict, okay? We are backing the complete ethnic cleansing of the Palestinians that Israel is doing and is committed to. What's stopping Ukraine from doing another mission like this with the drones? Russia can't possibly screen every truck coming in. I know, which is why acts like this are not about the immediate impact, to the planes that they blew up, but more so the threat of more incidents such as this one happening. That's the real story here.
But it may make the Kremlin begin to wonder if surprises like this come along.
Also, for the record, blowback is not a concept exclusive to the United States of America, chatters. What kind of blowback do you think Russia is going to experience, especially after it permanently annexes eastern Ukrainian territories? You think people are going to forget? You think they're just going to turn around and be like irredentist actions are different at the end of the day? While Ukrainian nationalism is built around not being Russian, there still is a closeness, both in language and culture and shared history between Ukrainians and Russians that does not exist for the Palestinians and Israelis. Okay? Like, Russians' actions are not settler colonial in the same way. It's still a right-wing government that is engaging in irredentist action, overtaking territory from a sovereign nation and destroying their sovereignty, and it will still inevitably bear a ton of resentment, understandable resentment, and also blowback to Russia. Okay? 100%. Russia cannot, as I said from day one, Russia cannot permanently annex Ukraine, even bits and pieces of Ukraine. It's a bit settler colonial. They're trying to depopulate areas and send Russians in. Yes. That is also true. That's USSR also did Russification in numerous places, including but not limited to Crimea. But what I mean is, there will still, like, Russia thinks that there are plenty of people who are still sympathetic to Russia in the territories, which will make it easier to occupy, which will make it easier to engage in constant surveillance of the Ukrainian population in an effort to squash any attempts of rebellion. Okay? They're wrong. I don't think they will be able to do that. That's why I said that it is impossible for Russia to permanently occupy Ukraine.
Frequently enough, how long they can sustain this conflict, and it may do practical damage to their war effort too, John. So a remarkable weekend here. I should point out too, record number of drones launched by Russia over the weekend, and a startling number taken out by Ukraine's electronic warfare too. So technology increasingly on Ukraine's side, John.
Yeah, Ukraine very much trying to increase the costs on Russia and what impact that could have on discussions going forward. Nick Payton-Walsh for us. Thank you, Nick.
Let's get more now on these major developments. With us now is Admiral James Seabitus. He is a CNN senior military analyst and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander. Also, CNN senior political commentator and former Congressman Adam Kinzinger. He's also a former member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committee and served in the Air National Guard. Good to see both of you. Thank you so much. Congressman, you first. Do you think this is a game changer or of some other significance that Ukraine could pull this off?
Yeah, this is a huge deal.
I think no matter what happens, they are going to overstate its importance, though. Like, while I do think that this is a significant counter, that will hopefully leverage Russia, that will hopefully give Ukraine more leverage to at least get Russia to the table. Okay. These guys, I suspect, are going to not try to push a ceasefire, but instead will be like, that's right. That's why Ukraine needs to keep fighting. Ukraine needs to keep fighting. Ukraine needs to keep fighting. It's obvious. Ukraine has all the manpower. Ukraine has all the power. Please keep fighting. Another spring counteroffensive incoming. Leverage Russia. Oh no. No, I mean, like, this gives Ukraine leverage, because now that there is a ceasefire negotiation at the table, and Russia very clearly is using the ceasefire talks, the back and forth, in an effort to try and sever America's ties with Ukraine by constantly telling him, like, oh, we're any day now, we'll do a ceasefire, I promise, because he knows that this is beneficial for Trump, okay? He knows what motivates Trump. Vladimir Putin is a leader of a state for decades now.
This is, I would actually say this is right there with when Ukraine had their very successful counteroffensive. Keep in mind, we've recently had, the President of the United States say that Ukraine doesn't hold any cards. This is cards. This is a serious amount of cards, by the way. Potentially taking out a third of Russia's bomber force is what this could potentially be, is a hit like no other. And keep in mind, Ukraine is actually winning this war as a defending country. All you have to do to win is keep defending until the attacker runs out of combat power. At the beginning of the full-scale invasion, Russia occupied 30% of Ukraine. Today, it's 18%. They've lost 1 million men, casualties in that process, and now potentially a third of their bomber force.
Oh my God, I can't listen to this. Oh my God, I called it. Oh my God, I called it. Instantly, dude. Insta-lock. Adam Kinzinger, dude, Ukraine is eviscerate. Ukraine basically cleansed the entire Russian population of armed and able-bodied men. They can keep going. They're winning right now. We have to keep giving them our old dusty equipment. Delusional, dude. Delusional. Oh my God, I hate these people. I hate them so much. What a crock of No, this is good as long as it actually offers Ukraine leverage to force Russia to a ceasefire. But of course, liberal war hawks are so bloodthirsty that they're like, oh, it's over. The dynamic shifted in favor of Ukraine once again.
This is a really big deal, potentially going into negotiations. And keep in mind, up until this point, Russia's been attacking indiscriminately civilian targets in Ukraine all week, all month, and frankly, the entire war.
So, Admiral, what does this say about you?
You don't like Ukraine propaganda from Republicans? Adam Kinzinger is a former Republican, okay? He's now a rhino. And secondly, I don't like people lying, okay? I don't like people lying, and I especially don't like people lying when they're lying to continue conflict.
Ukraine's, is it heightened intelligence gathering, or is it a new directive or strategy?
It's all the above, and I'll add a couple. It is a clever.
I don't understand how this is supposed to give Ukraine leverage. I mean, it gives Ukraine leverage in the sense that, like, we can strike within Russian territory and craft a incredibly sophisticated counter campaign that strikes, bro. They struck literally targets deep inside of Russia. Okay, that in and of itself is a significant blow to the Russian confidence. Like, a lot of people who want to be anti-imperialist right now turn around and act as though, oh, well, October 7th happened. Didn't you know what Israel was going to respond with? Like, the f do you mean? These guys have been getting absolutely destroyed. Okay. And on top of that, they turned around and said yes to a horrible ceasefire deal. A horrible ceasefire deal. in an effort to just say like, all right, whatever, Mr. President, Mr. Trump, Mr. President, it's okay. Sure, we'll fold. We'll do a ceasefire, only to turn around and have Vladimir Putin use the ceasefire negotiations to basically try and undermine the relationship that America has with Ukraine, despite Ukraine being a proxy for the United States in this endeavor.
Tactic. What they did was put these drones, quadcopter drones, into trucks. They got them deep, deep inside Russia. A way to think about these strikes, this would be like launching from Washington, D.C. and attacking
Look, anyone that tells you this is a tide shift and that Ukraine is now winning is a delusional monster. Okay? If liberals predictably use this as an opportunity to fucking bang the war drums harder, then, you know, that's up. Send Adam Kinzinger to the front lines, dude. Ukraine clearly is lacking in manpower. It's not just about arms. It's about men who can hold said arms. Send his ass to the front lines, dude.
Targets in Los Angeles. I mean, Russia's a huge...
Remember the incursion into Russia? How did that go? No, that was... The Kursk counteroffensive is entirely different than this. This is an insurgency. Okay? The Kursk counteroffensive was utterly meaningless at a time when Ukraine did not have any resources to defend the eastern Ukrainian territory from Russian encroachment. That is completely different than being able to pull off a attack such as this one deep in Russian territory without having any Ukrainians die in the process. This is insanely cheap. And because it's insanely cheap, it means it can happen again. Do you not understand? Do you know how costly the Kursk counteroffensive was? Like, an incredible amount of resources was shifted into encroaching in the Russian territory at a time when every single able-bodied man is needed on the front lines. And Russia basically took advantage of that. Russia took advantage of that and further encroached into eastern Ukrainian territory. This, on the other hand, is literally nothing. It's the most cost-efficient way of penalizing Russia.
Huge country, largest in the world. These strikes are at distance, exactly as Congressman, and by the way, you left out his most important credential for this conversation. He's an Air Force pilot, so he really understands the air distance equation and how...
Yeah, not only that, they might already have containers with more drones in Russian territory. Now Russia's forced to spend time and money checking every container in the nation. There's that too. Like... It did take a year of planning, to be fair, sure, but it doesn't matter. It still doesn't matter. It is an incredible cost to Russian defenses.
How remarkable this is. So, Fred, put together the unmanned technology.
Like, this is different than even when they do like drone strikes in like Moscow and because they'll do that every now and then Russia will retaliate in kind with significantly more force. They're not blowing up. They're not sending a drone into a residential complex. This is a targeted strike on Russian military capabilities deep inside of Russian territory. I'm not saying this is going to win the war, okay? Of course not. But this is so costly because it penetrates the security veil that every nation state needs to uphold. It causes instability. It causes fear. Even if the Russian forces in this process show a strong, act like nothing all that significant took place, they absolutely are worried about this happening again and again and again. Russia is a massive country. It is not that easy to monitor every single piece of commerce that goes in, okay? Strategically, this was a million times, in my opinion, a million times more sophisticated and better than the Kursk counteroffensive. Why do you keep saying Ukraine signed a ceasefire deal? When did that happen? Do you mean the minerals deal with Trump? No, Ukraine is literally now saying we will sign a ceasefire deal, that the one that Trump designed. A part of that is also the minerals deal with Donald Trump. Russia has consistently kept pushing the ceasefire deal off over and over again.
The intelligence of the locations and the military savvy to load it on trucks, get it across this vast country, launch it at scale and at distance. I think it's a remarkable strike. I'm Greek American, so I've got to give you this. It's kind of the Trojan horse. It's these wooden crates that got pushed into the country, and suddenly sprouting forth from it are these warriors destroying all of these planes, none of them human beings. It's really quite a remarkable military feat.
Russia says they want a peace deal, not interested in a 30-day break to rearm Ukraine. Okay, dude. Come on, guys. That's literally the same that pro-Ukraine NATO Andes would tell me when Russia did not have the upper hand, or rather, Ukraine had the highest position of bargaining. That literally is the same shit. People that want the war to continue just basically say that, okay? They say that. They say that lie. Oh, we don't want you to re-up and rearm. That was, for the longest time, what the Globe Twitter used to say to me when I was like, Ukraine should do a ceasefire deal. Ukraine should do a ceasefire deal. Russia has the upper hand now. You want Ukraine to fight another year and lose more territory? Wait, what? What are you saying? I want there to be a fire deal. What the I don't want Russia. I don't want Russia to continue encroaching into Ukrainian territory.
So then, Congressman,
I also don't believe that any kind of real commitment to ceasefire could take place without, I think, involving China in the process. But
clearly, Ukraine is likely preparing for some sort of retaliation. But at the same time, what does this kind of successful, attack from their standpoint do to the morale for Ukrainian fighters?
This is huge for Ukrainian morale. This is devastating for Russian morale. Now, keep in mind in this process, we're going to see, so Ukraine is going to see how Russia responds to this. They've seen how Russia does or does not, in this case, does not defend their military bases, and they're going to adjust from that. There likely could be many more attacks like this kind of on the perch, ready to go in Russia. And now all of a sudden, Russia has had to go from defending its air bases and its military stuff, basically, within 500 or 1,000 kilometers of the front line to the entire amount of Russia. And keep in mind, they're already almost out of air defense as it is. They had to move almost all their air defenses to Moscow just to defend their parade. So this is a big deal. And for Americans...
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. Shut up, dude. Holy shit. Oh, brother. Yeah, dude. Any day now. Remember when I was talking to Chris Hedges about this, when I was like, you can always be wrong as long as you are directionally in line with the American State Department and their ultimate goals. This is an example of that. Guys like this have been so consistently wrong throughout the entire conflict. Okay? And no one turns around and goes, dude, remember when you said the spring counteroffensive was going to destroy the Russian forces and purge all the Russian orcs from Ukrainian territory? This is it. This is what I mean. These guys can get away with just being wrong all the time because they're wrong at the behest of the State Department. Do you think that these NAFO idiots actually believe this shit, or are they intentionally exaggerating? I don't think they give a shit about Ukrainians. I don't think they care about Ukrainian lives. That's not a part of the calculation. The only calculation they care is about unlimited weapons contracts for the people that pay their salaries.
It's important to remember this. We have a choice. We can either help Ukraine defend itself, and if we do, we'll have a bit of a say in how Ukraine defends itself. If we don't, Ukraine's got to do what they can do. And again, it's important to keep in mind, every one of these targets today was a legitimate, under the rule of war, legitimate target for Ukraine to strike. What you will see in the Russian response is an attack on schools, on hospitals.
Oh my God, just tell the truth. You literally know better. You know they don't actually believe Ukraine will win. Stop pushing this narrative. It's ridiculous. Wait, what? I never said Ukraine is going to win. What the f are you talking about? What? I'm saying that Ukraine actually making this as costly as possible for Russia will, at the very least, force Russia's hand into coming to the most favorable ceasefire terms that Russia will get, barring Russia directly murdering more Ukrainians and encroaching further into Ukrainian territory. I already said liberals are stupid for claiming that this is a real tide shift and that Ukraine is going to win now. They always say that, and they're going to keep saying that over and over again, despite the fact that they are constantly wrong.
On civilian infrastructure, because that's what Russia does. Ukraine fights fair, Russia goes after civilians.
And then now, Admiral, all this taking place, on the eve, give or take a few days of, this meeting that is supposed to be taking place in Turkey between Russia and Ukrainian representatives. How might this either change the dynamic, apply more pressure, or might it mean a complete retreat from even having talks like this, meaning Russia retreating?
I wouldn't be surprised to see the Russians put a freeze on things. On the other hand, more likely they'll try and kind of brazen their way through it and say, we caught all the people who did this. There'll be a bunch of round up the usual suspect operations. Ukraine, by the way, was very careful to point out that everybody involved in this is already back in Ukraine. So anybody you arrest, Russia, is wrong. I believe that, frankly. And then secondly, again, the innovation on display here, I think, is really what you have to focus on. And so I would say the talks probably freeze momentarily, then they'll move forward. Hey, final thought for you as I watch this as a former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. People ask me a lot, hey, do we really want to take Ukraine into the alliance? When this war is over, this is going to be a country manufacturing 2 million, maybe 3 million drones a year. They'll have the most highly blooded, motivated military force on the continent. Do we want them on Team NATO? Man, I do.
Yeah, dude, totally. Okay, idiotic. Idiotic, dude. No NATO in Ukraine is a perfectly reasonable red line for any regional actor that is directly in contest with NATO. Okay, and also, oh God, liberals are so stupid. All right, let's continue.
The face in Istanbul, but with a gulf still between them. The setup for the latest peace talks serving to emphasize just how far apart the two sides are. Ukraine's delegation was again dressed in military fatigues. The Russians were in suits. While both sides wore stony faces, there is clearly no love lost. The talks ended after barely an hour. The only concrete outcome, another prisoner swap and the return of dead soldiers, even though the plan was to discuss each side's blueprint for peace.
A few days ago, we shared our documents with Russian side, but there has been no communication from them regarding their document until today. Only during the discussion today, Russians handed over its document to our delegation. Our teams will take a week to review the documents, and then we can coordinate further steps.
Russia's document reportedly reiterates its maximalist demands, including neutrality for Ukraine, the lifting of sanctions.
Yes, bro, Turkey literally is the table. Turkey is the table, okay? Not just at the table, is the table.
And recognition of its territorial claims.
The memorandum is quite detailed, worked out on our part. That is why the Ukrainian side decided to study it. They will study it. They will respond. We'll see.
This drone attack was humiliating for Russia and will undoubtedly prompt...
Oh, no. They're going to put... Okay, I misread. I misread the situation, chat. I feel like liberals are going to be like, well, this is it. They're winning now. They're winning now. They're going to be like, no, nuke the ceasefire negotiations, actually. Come on, Trump. Come on, Trump. Don't do the ceasefire, please. Please, just one more lane on the highway and just one more howitzer, okay? And any day now, Ukraine will turn around and start drafting 18-year-olds, and we will be able to eventually destroy the Russian orcs or whatever the... Holy They're unironically acting like gamblers. Can't quit on a hot streak. Can't quit while you're losing either. Yeah, except America is gambling with someone else's money. The money in this process is Ukrainian lives. It's not American lives. And America also doesn't give a shit about American lives either. Let's be real.
...to response. Now, the Kremlin hasn't said what that might be, but plenty of hardliners have been offering their thoughts, with some even calling for a nuclear attack on Ukraine as retaliation. Not the kind of rhetoric you'd associate with a country that claims to want peace. But on Russian state TV, there was no mention of the attack ahead of the talks. Moscow's keen to play down its impact. And on the streets of the capital, opinions are split over its significance.
I think it's exaggerated because these planes are very old and hardly anyone needs them. Besides, they're firing from submarines.
I think there should have been a response already yesterday, and it should have been quite harsh.
So despite the talk of peace, the mood is one of war, and a full ceasefire still feels like a long way off. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
The media sounds exactly when Israel did his attack on Lebanon. Yeah,